And this guy came up to me whom I had never met before, and he introduced himself, as Jack Posobiec. He introduced himself as, I work for Roger Stone, I'm Roger Stone's man, kind of thing. And he definitely introduced himself as, really tightly connected with the campaign, i.e. the Trump campaign. And he was our, maybe 2 degrees of separation from Trump himself, that kind of thing. Nothing was said definite, but, things were certainly implied. He actually did.
Welcome back to Posting Through It. Thanks for joining us another week. I'm Jared.
I'm Mike.
I'm Hannah.
And this episode is all about Jack Posobiec. Well, the formative years at least. Here's how news outlets have described Jack Posobiec in the last 2 weeks. NPR called him a far-right activist who has a long history of promoting anti-Semitic and white supremacist content. New York Magazine called him a, quote, Pizzagate conspiracy theorist. Mother Jones calls him a far-right activist, podcaster, and early booster of the Pizzagate conspiracy theory who has associated with white nationalists. Politico, prominent MAGA influencer and conspiracy theorist. CBS News, conspiracy promoter. And the New York Times, a pro-Trump social media personality.
Oof.
Well, besides maybe that last one, none of these are particularly kind, but even then, they don't even begin to tell the story of Jack Posobiec. In that opening clip, the voice you heard was none other than Richard Spencer, the infamous white nationalist activist and public face of a movement that at the time was calling itself the alt-right. Spencer spoke to One People's Project about Posobiec in a brief interview they recorded with him in 2018. We'll revisit some of the reasons somebody like Richard Spencer knew about Jack Posobiec then. We'll do that in a bit. But even in isolation, it makes the way Posobiec is talked about in the news today seem a little inadequate. In this episode, Mike is going to lead us through the early years of Posobiec's career. Mike did a lot of reporting on Posobiec when he was at SPLC, and I can think of no better person on this planet to help try to explain who he is. We're joined by Hannah Gais, who writes about the far right and posts on the internet a lot. Then there's me. Listeners, you have arrived at a cursed place with 3 people who know Jack Posobiec better than we know ourselves. Together, we'll try our best to answer.
Who the hell?
Who the hell?
Who the hell is Jack Posobiec?
Posobiec is born in 1984 in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is about 35 to 40-minute drive from Philadelphia. You sometimes see white nationalist extremists who are born in areas that are almost exclusively white, or have a very have very little diversity in their neighborhood. Norristown is about a third black, and obviously Philly has a huge black population. And that's just something to consider when you think about where Jack winds up. So he starts off as a kind of a theater kid and an aspiring entertainer. He wrote in his first book about doing stand-up comedy at a young age. And I think that is kind of a key thing to think about, whereas in regards to Jack in general, just him trying out different things in the entertainment world for years before he becomes kind of a known quantity. All right, so he gets into Temple University, where he gets a radio internship, Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, which is owned by CBS Broadcasting. So we're going to want to remember that for later, because it's going to be a a key thing in sort of building Jack's persona later, although not in the way, not in a straightforward way. While he's at Temple, he's the chairman of Temple University College Republicans, and started as a chapter of Students for Academic Freedom, which is an organization run by the David Horowitz Freedom Center. For people who don't know who David Horowitz is, he's like a hardcore anti-Muslim figure.
Another thing to know about David Horowitz is his Freedom Center. There was a period in right-wing politics where this was like a cash ATM, where everyone from Laura Loomer to Charlie Kirk to Andrew Torba, who owns Gab, would go to these events hosted by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and try to rattle some money loose. I think the last time I saw them in the news, they were expressing their disgust at Candace Owens, the right-wing podcast personality, for taking a rather aggressive anti-Semitic bent.
I think they did some flyering at one point when I was in grad school. So that would have been like 2017, 2018. But
I mean, Stephen Miller was also an admirer of David Horowitz, and it's like, very pro-Israel and also like extraordinarily anti-Muslim, and probably putting the anti-Muslim first ahead of even the pro-Israel.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a footnote in his college days, but I feel like an important one.
And also that was like where the reactionary energy was at this time, right? Like this is like, this is still War on Terror era. The other thing I would note about this is when he does the radio internship at this 1210 WPHT, it was mostly conservative radio station. And Michael Smerconish told me in 2020 that he had no memory of Jack doing things. And when I reached out to other people that were around there, so they might have seen him like kind of organizing for like events or parties for them, and stuff like that. Because, as you'll see, that what he did for them it becomes a bit of a dispute later in 2017. So after there, like he's doing what most people do outside of college, which is just try a grab bag of things to try to, get your life into a settled place, right? And
people
one thing
do that.
Yeah, they do. Like, some people even do it at middle age. But he takes something called like arrestee leadership thing. Like, I don't know what it is, like some sort of like week-long course at Wharton, which is Penn's business school. And that's important because later on, when he writes his first book, which is all about his involvement in the Trump campaign, he kind of lists it as part of his college education, and also it appears on a resume later on, even though it's something that he got through a credit card.
I think one thing that's important to bring up about these programs too is that in many respects, they are a cash cow for the school, and they're also just a way for people to attach themselves to Ivy League institutions, as he does later on. But first and foremost, if master's degrees at major universities are a nice grab bag for money for those universities, then these programs are basically just like you're sitting there and just being like, feed me, ATM, feed me. And that's it.
Right, exactly. And I think when I reached out to Wharton about this, and I think he gave like a very, I read it in like a very like sort of dry English accent, even though it's not what it was. It's just like a very snobby. It's like, we would be better able to tell you about students with degrees here. Like,
Jeez.
A nice way of like setting Jack on his ass. Anyway, so Jack continues, like at the same time this is happening, he's still dreaming about becoming an entertainer. And you can imagine a different scenario in which Jack succeeded in some way in the entertainment world, where we would never have actually dealt with him in this, in the capacity that we did. And he's got Broadway aspirations where he goes in and sort of auditions there, which he mentions on a podcast that is no longer available by anything other than archive. And he also gets a gig as a tough in the film Forbidden Kingdom, the Jackie Chan film. Jackie Chan was making like a film every 2 months. Then it was like Gucci Mane mixtapes in the late aughts. So it's like hard for me to keep track what Forbidden Kingdom was. But from people who have seen it, says he actually played like kind of a racist street tough because I guess he was going after Asian people or something. I don't quote me on that because I have not seen it, but it would be very funny, if that is the case. I've seen people tweet that. Somewhere along here, at some point, and I think you'll hear some of it on this podcast, Jack tries to show off his abilities as a guitar player and singer by doing a prolonged medley of David Bowie songs.
Yeah, that's going to be the transition music. And I'm going to spare everybody my thoughts as somebody who is writing music and who has played guitar for most of my life about some of the technique here, or, whether or not this instrument is in tune or his voice is hitting pitches that he is trying to hit. But you know what? I'm going to include it throughout the episode. I played some just a minute ago. Listeners, we report, you decide.
It's hard to swallow. What you get, you have to borrow. Fine.
It reminds me a little bit, like, obviously, like I love the band Ween, right? Like the sort of psychedelic, druggy pastiche band from the 90s. And if you ever listen to like Pure Guava or whatever, where it's like deliberately like it sounds like a CD scratching and like completely broken, and they'll like Gene Ween will do these sort of Bowie sounding voices like through while his mouth is full of helium and stuff like that. It sort of sounds like that by accident. That's the way I would say. Like it's not. He's trying to sound like Bowie, but like it does sound like something that would hit a lot harder if you had a head full of LSD.
I was gonna say I feel like it's like Neutral Milk Hotel, but if you basically took Neutral Milk Hotel and then like took the CD and then shoved it into a garbage disposal, let the garbage disposal go around, and then put the CD back on, like it kind of sounds like that. Yes. It's just like this sort of like kind of semi-grungy like sound, but bad, for lack of a better word.
So we're jumping around a little bit in the sort of pre-important era because I don't know the years of all these things, like when he auditioned for Broadway versus when he recorded that. I just think it's important to establish that this guy gave it a real fucking go in terms of trying to be a like known entertainer.
And that's something that you see across right-wing media. If you look at the stable of personalities that are at the Daily Wire, for example, a lot of these are failed movie stars. Although I think one of them doesn't one of them has like at least
Michael Knowles?
Yeah, he has at least like a few cameos and things, right? But generally speaking, it's a lot of people who wanted to get into modeling or wanted to get into comedy or wanted to get into this or that or this or that, and at some point looked up and was like, oh, I can just do politics, which is always like, that's the long time joke about DC is it's just like people who are like too ugly to be in Hollywood go work in politics in DC.
Well, I think it's safe to say that right up to Trump and including Trump, the entire MAGA movement, not necessarily the voters, but like the players are like people who would gladly have been liberal if you had given them like enough money and attention for doing it. Right. Like, I mean, it's like maybe there's some people, well, okay, Tom Homan. All right. It's that guy. Tom Homan is like, okay. He's like, it's like you programmed like a Terminator to be a white supremacist.
Stephen Miller would
okay,
never be
fine,
anything
sure.
other than Stephen Miller.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, there are people like that, but there are just tons of people in the MAGA world who, if you just gave them a little bit of money and let them be like a Hollywood celebrity, they would stop this overnight. So at the same time he's doing this, he's also kind of involving himself in local GOP campaigns. He participated in 2006, this may be before some other things, in a summer internship for Rick Santorum, right around the time that, does anyone remember when Santorum got like, it was an early version of internet trolling where like his name got associated with a kind of like some sort of like ass mucus like that comes out in anal sex. Does everyone remember that? So it's like,
yes.
like
that's why I started laughing.
Okay. Gay activists like took his thing and like took the most graphic, like, unpleasant like part of anal sex and like tried to associate a slime with, oh, that's the Santorum. Anyway. So that's around the time that Jack is involved with Rick. And Jack is like becomes a member of the Naval Reserve Intelligence, right? And he's sort of building he's building a bunch of different little things that could be careers at this time. Okay. And now we're going to get to the really interesting stuff. Jack, while it's still in the Naval Reserve, starts to post under the name Angry Game of Thrones Nerd and starts to run a blog focused on Game of Thrones. Did you either of you watch Game of Thrones, by the way, or read it or any of that?
I did not. This was probably like a decade ago. Someone I was close to was very, very into Game of Thrones and was like, you have to come. We're all going to watch the new episode. And I tried to watch it, and that is just, I'm sure it's a great show, but it's just not my genre. It's hard for me to get into it. But so I'm completely unfamiliar with Game of Thrones.
I am married to a Game of Thrones fan. So when the last
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Tom is a Game of Thrones fan.
Man, that's such a shame. I like Tom too.
I know. I just it was a bit of a hurdle for us in our relationship. Right around the time both of us turned 30 was around the time that the final episode came out, and we were in Mexico, and we watched the last episode of Game of Thrones in Mexico, and I had only seen the first season and then just gave up. But it was very funny to be in Mexico City with a bunch of people who were just booing at the episode because they were like, "This is shit! This is shit!" And that's basically my main experience.
That's
Game
interesting.
Of Thrones that I need to remember.
That's a good. I was going to interject that I'm more of a Doom Patrol Dune man myself. When it comes to fantasy, but that's a good transition because Jack starts to pick up a lot of steam as a Game of Thrones blogger, in part because he becomes critical of the show vis-a-vis the books. And he starts to post, his posts start to become more demanding of the show. And he's doing this while he's in the Naval Reserve, potentially while he's on duty. Who knows? We don't know what he's doing, but we know that this guy loves to post throughout his life, and he starts to post more and more during this time around the middle end of the Obama years. Okay. And as he's posting on Game of Thrones, you can go back and check out through OSINT investigations who he was communicating with. And the posts start with stuff focused on Game of Thrones. And then right around 2015, they start to get a little bit more angry, political, and pro-Trump after he announces. And you can find him in threads, the Game of Thrones thing, in threads with Roger Stone's old account, with Cernovich's old account. I found one with, I believe, Brad Griffin. Now, whether it was he had retweeted Brad Griffin or he had replied or whatever it was to something that was posted. Oh, I should add, Brad Griffin was of A League of the South, one of the groups that appeared at Unite the Right in Charlottesville in 2017. So, the Game of Thrones, it's going off the rails of Games of Thrones. They're not talking about Game of Thrones as much anymore. Around the same time, he publishes something under some science fiction under the name Jack Michael Doyle, which is a pretty good name. I like it. And it's a book called Wade Asher, Agent of Admiralty. Excuse me. And this is really interesting because I feel like here's a sample from it. The reason why it's compelling to me is because it seems to be an inner monologue that represents something about what Jack is experiencing, in the Naval Reserve at that time. And it says,
"For years, he waited. He always knew that someday, somehow, they would bring him back. The long days of entering meaningless data into mindless systems, typing and retyping reports and operational procedures had taken their toll. His prison had been a crucifix and a keyboard."
Cubifus.
Cubifix?
I think that's
Should I
supposed
just
to
redo
be.
that sentence?
I think that's supposed to be like cubicle office.
Oh.
It's the future. So it's a new word. That's what cubifus is.
Oh. I'm sorry. I'm too dumb. TDM was his torture. There could only be a few reasons for the summons today. They might be reassigning him to an even more mind-numbing position. Of course, they would do that in person. They'd want to see him squirm, hear him talk back in defiance, wanted him to resist only to be beat down and led away in cufflocks. Pageantry and drama. Sounded like a good show. It made sense, he figured, seeing as he'd only show up for duty for 1 week in the past year, and that was only because he'd lost a bet. Man, that sucks.
Okay, so cufflocks is another future word, I guess, because I don't know what the hell that is.
This feels kind of personal.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I picked this one.
It's what makes him, like, today he styles himself, when he's introduced at Turning Point USA. I almost said concerts because,
they kind of are.
They kind of look like that.
If you ever watch these events, it'll be like, coming to the stage, Jack Posobiec, fire and confetti and stuff, right?
Agent Poso.
Yeah, no, they're like, he was an intelligence analyst. Like, it's one of the countless guys out there today that just completely fudge this, like, ultimately largely inconsequential military experience, and then they're like, that is why I am uniquely qualified to provide insights into global trade wars. And it's like, oh, okay. Come on, dude.
Well, it's sort of like, that's kind of, from what I can understand, the story of Jack's military career. He goes to, like, he spends some time in China. He also spends some time in Guantanamo Bay, according to the records we've seen, and him bragging about it. But it's been heavily like, people have determined that he was most likely collecting urinalysis at Guantanamo Bay, which is a job. I mean, it's something that somebody had to do there. I don't want to like spit on it necessarily, but there's a longing for action.
To pee into the cup, not spit.
Well, that was only part of what he was doing, but like a lot of it is basically, from what I understand, like, it just wasn't anything important.
It was
he was just kind of a guy.
It was a desk job, and it's like, the world is run by people with desk jobs, right?
Which is fine.
It's fine.
Desk jobs are fine. I say this while recording this podcast at a desk that I sit at every day.
It's fine, but what the fuck does this guy know about geopolitical conflict?
No, I mean, that's a different story, though. What I would say to this is that you can feel the guy, his desire, his desire to be that entertainment figure that he wanted to be his whole life in that little snippet. That's why I love it. And wasn't happy with the career the Navy had laid out for him. He wanted more. So Roger Stone kind of starts to mentor Jack, and I think he meets him primarily through the Game of Thrones thing, but I don't have any evidence of that. I don't know how they met, but we do know that at least the digital evidence is that they'd start communicating there. He sort of starts to follow Stone around. One way he works with him is like volunteering for an organization called Citizens for Trump. If you look at like past Citizens for Trump posts, it has that like really cringe-inducing racism that you would see around Obama. Right. So this is like, you understand that, like, it's almost hard to remember a time before Trump now. But this is like, Obama like led into Trump, and Obama was the whole culture, politically at that time. And so most of the stuff you would see on the right would look pretty grim. Right. It was like this really blunt racism, like stuff depicting him as an African, like, tribal person or something like that. And those are the type of posts you would see Citizens for Trump promoting. So Jack comes with Roger Stone to the 2016 RNC in Cleveland. And he's total unknown at this time. And you can see him, like, Roger Stone does some sort of book like signing or book thing in like a local Barnes and Noble or whatever it was. And you can see there's like barely anyone there to see Roger Stone. It's just like a handful of people. But Jack is like right next to him, right? It's sort of like he's like his sidekick here, at least visually. He participates in an event hosted by this great replacement themed white supremacist website called Eternal Century. If you look at archives of it, what Eternal Century was, it was like, again, much more like racists got much more savvy, as Trump took power and the alt-right started to feed into it and stuff like that. Their posting got more, got more, I don't know. They got more focused on different things. They were able to be more disarming and stuff like that, and be able to prey on vulnerable people with pop culture reference and stuff. This was still, again, that blunt racism from the Obama era. And it's a lot of focus on like white genocide, which was the more naked, mask off version of Great Replacement, the sad, weepy whites are going to die type of thing for Eternal Century. Jack meets with Richard Spencer at according to Richard Spencer, a Scottish-themed Hooters bar in Cleveland. Do you want to tell us what that is, Hannah?
So the Tilted Kilt was is actually, in fact, accurately described as a Scottish-themed Hooters bar. It is a kind of Scottish ripoff of Hooters. It's a chain.
Wow, I never thought I'd find myself agreeing with Richard Spencer. That is how I would describe it.
Hooters bars?
That is how I would describe the Tilted Kilt. Yeah.
Yeah. I will confess that I have repeatedly tried to make Mike go to a Tilted Kilt. The one that this event took place at, unfortunately, has closed. It would seem that the market for Scottish Hooters bars has somewhat slowed. I'm sure there's a broader piece of cultural commentary around there, but I'll leave it at that.
I think that's just too much, I'd be too stimulated. I can't have Hooters is bad enough, but then all of a sudden it's Scottish themed. That's like a whole nother level, right?
I'm sorry, that's just too anti-white, Mike. It's too anti-white for this podcast.
Let's talk about who was at the Tilted Kilt that day. You got the Mike Cernovich like signing copies of Gorilla Mindset, my favorite book.
Oh my God, I had a signed copy.
You did?
I did. I did for like an hour. Back before all these people knew who I was, I went to the Gateway Pundits inauguration party, and I brought it was at Shelley's Cigar Bar in DC. And I brought a copy with Anna. I brought a copy.
Yes, I've made Mike go there.
I brought a copy of Gorilla Mindset, and I got it signed by Mike, who didn't know who I was. But I then proceeded to drink so much at the party that I forgot it in the Uber on the way home. So there's some, if you were driving an Uber circa 2017 in the Washington, D.C. area, and you discovered a signed copy of Gorilla Mindset, please get in touch. It's mine. I want it back.
I'm crying. Okay. I had a million jokes about who could have found that and sort of radicalized themselves like since that time, but like let's keep moving.
I can't wait for my day job to incorporate this into my next employee review. Like you told a story on your podcast about.
So members of the white nationalist group Identity Europa are there. Roosh is there. I haven't heard much from Roosh recently, but he was sort of like the prototype of Andrew Tate, right? Like he's just like his main thing was just like maxing out on misogyny, and so he was there, and Jack takes a photo with Richard Spencer. Right, and does he post it? I believe he posts it, right? Or maybe it's
Richard posted it in June 2017. Okay.
Yeah, that's how we got it. So yeah, they take a photograph together, and Jack is grinning away next to Richard Spencer. And like, to be clear, Richard Spencer is like kind of has his, you can debate where his head is at, but he was at this time the scariest person. He's no longer the scariest person in the biz. He was like the scariest person you could associate yourself with. He was the he was he was the Hitler coming, like in the minds of the media and everybody else. And Jack is like smiling away, taking a photo with him. Then he's involved in some, he's out on the streets. He's there with some whatever like event that Milo Yiannopoulos is hosting. In his book, he makes a big deal where he's just sort of like, and we had a gay guy, kind of like, I don't remember exactly what he wrote, but that was essentially, it was just sort of like the Trump movement had it all, kind of like we even had our own gay guy. Like it's really quite funny. So yeah, now we get interesting. Now I want to just tell everybody, I want to just reset everybody's brains here for a second. I think it's important we slow this down. Nobody knows who Jack is yet. He is still posting under the Angry Games of Thrones account. No one knows his name. No one can recognize him in a crowd. He's completely unknown still. So just because he's meeting with these people doesn't mean that he is somebody whose name carries any weight in the right-wing media space.
The show started with a clip of Richard Spencer talking about Jack Posobiec. Later on in the interview, he expresses his surprise, it being 2018 at that point, at what Jack had become. I think, one, we just talked about Richard, so this is relevant, but two, it also, I think, kind of captures how these people saw Jack at the time, which is, as Mike said, kind of a nobody who sort of presented himself as being in the know somehow.
Jack Posobiec really burst onto the scene. I mean, I thought he was a behind-the-scenes operator. He suddenly became a brand, yeah. The next Cernovich, the next person doing fake news. And I had heard about
a hanger-on. And also, Richard says that Jack, at the Tilted Kilt, introduced himself as, I'm Roger Stone's man, or something to that effect. Which is a really interesting thing to say, which, whether he's formally working for him through Citizens for Trump, or whether they have some kind of, I'll pay you to be my assistant, or whether it's not paid and whatever, he is introducing himself as sort of, and he said, Richard also said that Jack painted himself as having connections to the Trump campaign, which was not so difficult to do. I think another thing for younger listeners, especially who may not, have lived through all this Trump stuff and may have been like younger when Trump was kind of taking power. So I think it's really important to remember that also the first Trump campaign was a fucking shit show. It was like it had no business winning. It was like a shopping cart that ran funny. It was not like anybody could get access to Trump at that point, which is why the concerns about Russia's access to Trump became so prevalent, which brings us up to the next topic. So as the summer rolls on, Jack, through his Angry Game of Thrones fan account, starts to post a couple of things. One, he starts posting the triple parentheses around people's names. That's the first thing. And I think for people who don't know where that came from, it came from a white supremacist podcast called The Daily Shoah, which is a pun, obviously, on the Daily Show. And it was hosted by a white supremacist group called The Right Stuff. To know that at that point, you probably had to be either listening to that show or really clued into everything that was happening at 4chan, because what they would do is take a person's Jewish last name, let's say Silverman or something like that.
For any name that sounded Jewish. It wasn't
well, these are not the best researchers.
They put it around my name one time. Holt, that famous.
Well, let me say what it is. It's three parentheses on either side. And the idea was that it echoes, so that way you can separate a Jewish person from a group of Western names. So you would put I use Silverman as an example, but it's like Smith, comma, John,
Bernstein.
comma, Bernstein, triple parentheses, right? Just to let everybody know that the person there was Jewish. So Jack's account was doing that at that time. And he was also posting a lot of weird pro-Putin shit. Can you please describe, Hannah, for us, the meme that he posted in July 2016?
Basically Trump riding a lion and Putin riding a bear. The shirtless Putin meme comes basically from this photo that Putin did where he was riding a horse, and then people took that and put him on a bear. universal meme symbol of Russia, and kind of a thing that was going around for a while. And it's kind of a dual strongman, I guess. But he describes it as what Magister Donald rides with Lord Putin. Yeah,
you can imagine him also reading that in like his David Bowie voice too. Like, Magister Donald rides with Lord Putin. Right? He's like, you know, it is like, it's amazing that somebody whose sense of humor is so cringe has gotten so far. But you know, again, that right-wing space was ripe for exploitation. So now it's about to get really interesting. It's about to get really interesting here for Jack. In September 2016, the Game of Thrones account has about 10,000 followers or so, maybe a little more. And that was a lot for Twitter in those days, in part because you're adding new users after that, right? So it was getting bigger, and now we have all kinds of like bots swooping in to like pad people's accounts, particularly on the right and verified accounts. So 10,000, he had a pretty good fan base. And what you saw, if you go through his like the sort of OSINT investigation of that account, is people who like Game of Thrones getting more and more irritated with how racist and anti-Semitic and political the account is coming, where people are just like, hey man, can you just please stick to Game of Thrones?
Can you stick to the show that kind of sucks at this point, but it goes on for another 3 years for some reason?
It's like, hey, please. I signed up for this account for Game of Thrones. I really didn't want you singling out Jewish people's names.
This is just, people describe the criticisms people are making about Jack in a lot of different ways, but it was about ethics in Game of Thrones criticism at the key. That's a bad Gamergate joke.
It's okay. I actually think it's a good Gamergate joke.
Please,
I thought that was good.
Please,
we need purity. Well, I'll tell you this. Like,
just keep us. Please get us out of here. Keep us moving.
These are the things that I nerd out about, like electronic music, techno, things like. If I was an account and all of a sudden it starts posting like a bunch of like just racist stuff, all of a sudden I would get super pissed if I was getting good information. And maybe he was providing good Game of Thrones information, or maybe the people who are fans of Game of Thrones have very low bar for what is good content. But he kind of rips the mask off. As Ghostface Killer would say, once the face got revealed, game got real.
Since the face been revealed, game got real. Radio been gassing niggas.
And he puts X's, red X's next to his name. Does anybody here, I'm looking at you, Jared, remember what the red X's meant when you put back on the side of your name?
I remember a lot of Trump people putting the red X's next to their name, but I don't recall what they were supposed to symbolize.
I think it had to do with being a deplorable for one thing, but they used the frog avatar also for that. But I think it had to do with them banning Trump supporters from what was then Twitter. I think so. But maybe Jack will come on sometime and tell us about it. So he does that, and he starts to push the racist Stop the Steal campaign with Roger Stone.
I think we should just take a second to talk about the 2016 Stop the Steal, because I think a lot of people associate that phrase with the 2020 election. It was the slogan of Capitol rioters, after all, and certainly no Capitol riot happened in 2016. But Stop the Steal was not invented in 2020. It did not come out of nowhere. In 2016, there was sort of the same groundwork laid, but not used because Trump won. For the Roger Stones, the Jack Posobics of the world, getting ready to claim, if Trump lost, that the election was rigged.
Right.
So, but they didn't need to do that, obviously.
Well, I think it's also important to say that, like, in a strange twist, and this is true of many things that become destructive, Stop the Steal actually came from a somewhat genuine place. I hesitate to use those words, but at the time of the Republican National Convention, they were trying to figure out how to overturn the will of the voters to get rid of Trump. So they were trying to figure out how they could put John Kasich, how they could put Ted Cruz or somebody like that over Trump because people, bigwigs, still wanted to stop Trump from being president. And the Stop the Steal campaign, when it came up from Roger Stone's area, was just to try to threaten people from overturning the will of the voters.
Those people being the Republican Party, capital R, capital P. The institution itself was like, oh my God, this guy's going to kill us. They thought they were going to get killed. They thought they were going to lose. Everybody thought Trump was. But then by the time September rolls around, it's racist, because then it is Trump is now the nominee, and now they're focused on, wait, you know what could steal the election? Black people in Philadelphia. They're the ones who can steal the election. It becomes a racist thing in 2016, and it comes about disqualifying the vote of black people in urban areas of swing states.
Probably worth noting, too, that actually in one of his books, he does have a chapter called Stop the Steal, talking about this.
That is correct. Yeah. That is correct. That same book also includes printed URLs. I should note.
Yes, and the phrase, always be chugging.
Always be chugging. But printed URL, like he just cuts and pastes the URLs if you can click on it when you pick up the paper copy.
Something I want to say about Jack's early books is that they were published via a clearinghouse run by a blogger who went as Vox Day. He was like one of the prolific alt-right bloggers of the time. So even these like very benign and ridiculous, poorly written, so not enough ways to say that this book is bad, from its origin. It was coming presumably with the assistance of this alt-right blogger in some form. So even the mundane stuff is still has a foot in the world, and is still kind of that early plug-in to, not just Republican politics, but really nasty shit.
Yep. So
there's also inexplicably a photo of the Golden Dawn in it. Fun fact.
I did not know that. I don't remember it. Okay. So one of the first things he does now that it's mask off is go and do some huge air quotes here, journalism at the Willard Hotel to document an event hosted by Richard Spencer, Peter Brimlow, and Jared Taylor. Hannah, do you want to tell us who those men are?
Well, we've already covered Richard, but Peter Brimlow and Jared Taylor are these two longtime white nationalist publishers. So Jared Taylor runs a website and kind of self-styled think tank called American Renaissance. Peter Brimlow, up until somewhat recently, ran a website called VDare. And they basically, both of them have been involved in the white nationalist movement for years. Peter Brimlow is actually not from the United States. He's from the UK, which I think is somewhat relevant when you're a website that primarily pushes anti-immigration talking points, but nevertheless. As to the event itself, it was basically the three of them had organized this press conference, basically to introduce the alt-right. So this was I think maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks after Hillary Clinton gave a speech denouncing the alt-right as part of her campaign. And it put this really big spotlight on the movement for them to capitalize on it. And they put together this press conference basically for Richard, Peter, and Jared to all present themselves as not necessarily the leaders of this movement, but kind of like central figures, central nodes within it. And
yeah, I think it's important to note here that Jared Taylor in particular traffics in sort of race and IQ stuff. The type of stuff that make you feel like nauseous when you see it, like, that black people are predisposed to be less intelligent and essentially less human than whites. Just a bonus there that I want to add is just Olivia Nuzzi was also there, like reporting on something. Just that's a little nugget that came from Luke O'Brien, who I texted last night. So in September, now he's like, again, face been revealed, game got real. Jack starts posting hard. Like he's posting hard now. He's like really, his phone is going to break. He's posting so hard. And one thing he starts doing is posting a series of tweets where he awkwardly crams the numbers 14 and 88 into them. Hannah, what is 1488? You better than anyone would know.
Wow, interesting transition. Thanks. The 14 words is a neo-Nazi slogan, and 88 is basically stands for the 8th letter of the alphabet. So, Heil Hitler.
So I'm going to give you one example of the ways he did it. He did it so many different times. He would just find ways to sneak 14 and 88 into his tweets. And one of them, he posted, New York Times, page 14. 88 military leaders endorsed Trump. Now, this is interesting because I went to make sure that this was not because I thought this was a great way for me to prove that the 1488 tweets were deliberate. And I did it. Everyone. So I actually pulled a paper from that day, and there was a thing about Trump's military leaders. And guess what? There were 90 military leaders, 90. And it was not on page 14. So Jack was obviously jam cramming, because I want to give the benefit of the doubt here, was jam cramming the numbers 14 and 88 deliberately into his posts.
Got his ass.
Got it. Boom. By the way, everybody.
Breaking.
All the people who harass me with headlines on Blue Sky are like
the front page of Drudge Report with the sirens. You guys remember that?
I said all the people who harass me over headlines on Blue Sky are just sitting there listening to this, of course he was 1488, you jackass. What is your problem? I just wanted to be sure. Everybody, that Jack was doing it.
Straight to jail right away.
So also in September, he's having a busy month here. This is a big month for him. He's top performers of the month, on the sport, except for racism. So he stages this kind of one-man anti-Hillary Clinton demonstration outside of the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture on the National Mall in DC. He puts on a blonde wig, and if you see pictures of him that's just around his face there, he because he's got his stubble, he looks like Kurt Cobain, except worse. It doesn't look like Hillary Clinton.
I remember this when it happened. It was what? Yeah,
and he's wearing an orange jumpsuit, and he's holding a sign that says "Blacks are super predators." H. So the idea is, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, guys. The idea is that Hillary Clinton thinks that blacks are super predators, and he needs to let black people know that. But I want you to think about this, even if you give him the most amount of benefit of the doubt here. He is doing this in front of a mostly black crowd, many of whom waited decades for the opening of this museum, including John Lewis, who fought a quarter of a century to see it open and cried at its opening. And then you have this one white guy just waving a sign at these people that says blacks are super predators. It's the mind-blowing gif. I can't even, it's I wouldn't, even if I were a very racist guy and wanted to do this, wouldn't you be scared you get your ass kicked? It's just a totally insane thing to do. Nevertheless, he does it. And I think it is useful for one of you to please inform us what happens after this. So he gets detained by a black officer of some kind. I'm not sure whether he was security personnel or police. And then he gets home, and Gateway Pundit runs a story on it. Jack is connected with folks in Gateway Pundit, I believe, because Cassandra Fairbanks there yet? Doesn't matter. Anyway, they run an article about this, and he texts it to a particular person. Who's the person?
He texts it to Richard Spencer. With photos, too.
Judicial Watch tells me they think 100% it's because I was a white protester and black cop. DC political demonstration laws are extremely lenient.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
Reminded me of the fatties in Covington's novels.
LOL. I haven't read a lot of Covington, to be honest. So funny.
So this is interesting because Harold Covington is a Nazi, and I do not use that term lightly. Harold Covington has involved himself with multiple neo-Nazi causes. In fact, I think one of the most interesting things to bring up about Covington is that he lived in Rhodesia for a while, and he claimed to be a mercenary in the Rhodesian army. He claimed to have organized the Rhodesian White People's Party there, but he was then expelled from the country in 1976. This is from a book by Elizabeth Wheaton called Codename Green Kill. I quote, his brand of racism was too vile for even the white supremacist Rhodesians. He got kicked out in 1976. So, yeah, I mean, Covington is unapologetically a neo-Nazi. Later in his life, he's pushing for advocating creation of a whites-only homeland in the Pacific Northwest. It's this initiative called the Northwest Territorial Imperative. He founds this group called the Northwest Front. There's no way, even now in the current political climate, there's no way you could say that Harold Covington is not a white supremacist. That said, Mike, you are the one who has read Harold Covington far more than I. Much like Richard Spencer, I have also not read much Covington. I never really saw that much of a point.
So I think that the key thing for everybody to know is that Jack, and it's important to just frame Jack like clearly with this, because this is one of the hardest hitting things you have from his early career, which we're going through here. Jack brings up Covington to Richard Spencer, and Richard Spencer's like, LOL, I don't even read that. Okay. So you have like the face of the white nationalist movement in the United States is like, oh, okay, man, that's a little racist for me. You know, and but Jack reads it. Covington wrote, again, like huge air quotes, science fiction books. I actually read some of that for my reporting on Jack because I'm apparently insane. I can't even believe I did. It was some of the most repetitive and stupid fiction I've ever read. And the fatties were actually like, they were kind of like liberal FBI agents, sort of in some sort of future world or whatever. And to him to think of that as a metaphor tells me that he was really reading Covington. He was not like, you know, it's not like he's like, let me Google something that'll impress Richard Spencer. I mean, he's referring to a very specific facet in that book because I want to know what the fatties were. I want to know if the fatties were all black or whatever. But it's more that they're like ideologically in line with liberalism. So yeah, weird stuff. And of course the officer is you know, a black man.
It's just telling. This exchange is telling to me because it just like you said, it's kind of a deep reach. I mean, if you were creating like a syllabus of far right, radical right, whatever term you want to use here, reading, I think Covington would basically be extra credit. Like you'd start with the Turner Diaries. I mean, something like Siege,
Yeah.
Which is this collection of newsletters by a neo-Nazi James Mason that's it's from the 1980s, but it's become significantly more relevant in the past 10 years because of a couple of different younger neo-Nazi groups. Like, that would be all stuff that's on there, but like at this point for the modern movement, Covington is something that would be kind of like, well, you can read this for extra credit, but why? Otherwise, you don't really need to.
Also, from a literary perspective, these books suck ass. That is my review. It's like some of the worst prose you'll ever see. But I think, Jared, I think you should tell us what happens next. So Trump is kind of like gaining on Hillary, but not enough. Not enough, like Kendrick Lamar says. So what happened? What do they do to kind of shake the foundations of the race? These influencers. What is injected into the middle of this?
Well, that would be Clinton campaign manager John Podesta's emails, which were published on WikiLeaks. There has been a lot of debate since then about how those emails were obtained, who gave it to WikiLeaks. I mean, WikiLeaks, however you may feel about it, at the onset was unique and novel, but quickly turned into like an avenue where hostile states like basically like go dump the shit they get on the other countries or other places they just need a clearinghouse for. So people think Russia got the emails. I have no idea. There's countless people on Earth who would have wanted that. But the point is, these emails got out. People were going through them. There wasn't a whole lot in there that was really consequential. It would have been shocking, and most people who get that far in politics or business or whatever it is learn at a certain point that you don't write down the terrible shit that you're going to do and send it to somebody, because
that's why God invented telephones.
That is why in Stephen Miller's emails to Breitbart, half of them just say, "Call me, call me." That is what a professional's email inbox looks like. Let's set up a call. I would love to talk to you about this on a call. So there's not a lot, but some conspiratorial parts of the internet start noticing some exchanges about pizza. Pizza. And one specific pizza restaurant in Washington, D.C. called Comet Ping Pong, which is a great place to eat. I've been there a few times. Nice place. But this pizza place, combined with all these existing conspiracy theories about Clinton and the Clinton campaign, combined with these emails mentioning pizza, well, some people start to put together, well, you know who else talks about pizza a lot? Pedophiles. And to a degree, I mean, it is.
It's like the celebrity magazines where it's like stars. They're just like pedophiles. They eat pizza too.
Well, I mean, in online spaces historically, that promote or enable sexual predators who target children, they'll use code words, and pizza is one of those words. Pedophiles have used triangle-shaped symbols to kind of call out to each other, reference each other. But to describe it as a stretch is really, really underselling it. But that doesn't stop anything. This collection of conspiracy theories comes to be known as Pizzagate, and it just catches on fire right at the tail end of the campaign. And Jack, he's got a big role in this.
I will say, as a former pizza delivery driver, I did a lot of pizza delivery driving during college, and then the year after, when I was much like Jack, I suppose, trying to figure out my life, this whole thing, the whole obsession with pizza as some kind of secret code, has always confused the hell out of me. Because the one thing you learn about delivering pizza is that everybody orders fucking pizza, rich, poor, doesn't matter.
I think I'm feeling like having some for dinner tonight. Anyway, continue. So what does Jack do? What is he? Because most people have just been posting about this, right, Jared? Like most people just posting, but Jack does something different.
Jack Posobiec's role in Pizzagate, which he just nakedly lies about today, and I'll get into that in a second, was not as an early promoter. He certainly was like, check out John Podesta's emails. We got to research them. It's like the precursor to QAnon. It's all these people that are doing their own research based on these emails. A lot of them start to fixate on this pizza restaurant. The owner of this pizza restaurant is connected to, Democratic Party circles, operatives, that sort of thing. And all these theories start to bubble up in these spaces about Comet Ping Pong, this poor restaurant. And they are trafficking children in tunnels beneath the restaurant, is how one theory goes. The restaurant is a front, a place to go, almost like the same way conspiracy theorists would talk about Bohemian Grove. It's like, there's rituals in here. There's, children go in here and they don't come out. And it's getting bad at that point, to the point where the restaurant is getting harassed on the regular. There's all kinds of weird people showing up. The police are involved already. It's after the election. Jack is looking around online, and The way he tells it, he realizes this restaurant's about 30 minutes from his house. So he's going to go there. And he's really, really into Periscope, which was a live streaming service that Twitter used to run at the time.
R.I.P.
So he goes.
We'll get into that also because he becomes a big part of his kind of arsenal.
So he grabs his buddy named George. I still am not entirely sure who this guy is, but they go and they live stream their visit to Comet Ping Pong. Now, if you ask Jack about it today, if he's confronted about it today, he'll tell you that he went there to debunk Pizzagate. It was ridiculous. And he lived close enough. He was going to go show people that this was just a bunch of hogwash, which is a very fun way to talk about something that you have attempted to delete all traces of on the internet post-shooting, which I'll also talk about. So he goes there. He's live streaming. He's acting kind of weird. The people at the restaurant catch on to him. They kick him out. And then he, subsequently posts all these videos talking about the experience, talking about what he saw. I'm going to play some audio clips of this here, and we'll come back to it. I apologize. This is going to be, a couple minutes chunk of audio, but I think it's important, especially in the context of him claiming that he went to Comet Ping Pong to debunk Pizzagate. I want you to listen to these clips and tell me if this sounds like somebody who is there to debunk a theory.
Threw me out of Comet Pizza. I don't understand what it is that they have to hide there, but we saw a secret room. A secret room in the very far back of this place. And we saw little kids going in and out.
3 kids at least.
And
then they disappeared.
We saw the secret bathroom door. We saw a lot. He said, "I hope you can stand the heat." You remember when he said that?
Yeah.
He said, "I hope you can stand the heat." So I ordered some jalapeno pizza because I like spicy pizza. And this guy said, "I hope you can stand the heat." And that guy was the actual owner. You remember earlier?
Was he the owner?
Yeah. So you remember earlier we had.
That's why he came over, because he was checking you out.
He was checking me out. Yeah. We had a girl walk by and said, "I'll take care of you," and she was the waitress.
Yeah. And
but
then
then
we
this
got passed on to this
other guy came over and started talking to us, and he was either the owner or the manager. And
was
he
that
said,
the guy that asked you if you were filming, or was that the other chick?
No, that's the same guy. The chick never came back. It was this guy all along. Somebody called him, and it wasn't like a regular phone. It was like a walkie-talkie or something. And you know why people use walkie-talkies? In the Navy, we used to use walkie-talkies a lot over cell phones, and you know why? Because walkie-talkies can go through different levels in the ship. So if he's communicating with somebody like in a tunnel or in a basement or in another place in the area,
hey, get the kids out of here.
That would be the perfect way to communicate with each other. And it's also a closed push-to-talk system, so it's not, it can go through concrete, it can go through steel.
Absolutely, they watch the
So there's a lot of just ridiculous stuff in this clip. He is faulting the restaurant for all kinds of things. He says, "Why are there kids here late at night on a Wednesday?" It's a bar. He describes it as a bar. It's a restaurant. He talks about the hidden bathroom doors. Comet Ping Pong has the doors to the bathroom are like built into a wall. Weird design feature, but if you go to restaurants that were built in a certain time frame, it was like trendy for a period. There's a period of restaurants that like have features like this. Talks about a back room. There was a back room with a curtain. Comet Ping Pong is in DC, and most of the architecture in DC is these super long row houses. The thing that was happening, the candlelight gathering of children in the back room closed by a curtain, by all accounts that I've seen, was a child's birthday party. It was a private birthday party. So they closed a curtain. And then he talks about walkie-talkies. He tries to cite his Navy experience. Oh, we used walkie-talkies because they could go through multiple levels. You could talk to somebody on the bottom of the ship with a walkie-talkie in a way you couldn't with a phone. This man has clearly never worked in a restaurant where, service staff, front of house, back of house will communicate with walkie-talkies instead of calling each other every 60 seconds. So all of this is just ridiculous. And then he goes on InfoWars. InfoWars invites him on. InfoWars has been playing footsies with Pizzagate at that point. And again, I will ask you, listener, does this sound like somebody who has just debunked Pizzagate?
What happens?
And you did saw what happened, and you saw kind of a strange reaction. But, to me, humans have a sixth sense. There's a reason why certain environments make our hair stand up on the back of our necks. There's a reason why we get butterflies. I feel like if you were in this establishment and there was serious activity like this alleged pedophile activity going on, you would kind of sense it. You would sense the weirdness of the place. Just tell me what it was like when you walked in, and then how kind of the staff there treated you.
Weird vibe, man. Really weird vibe. And if anyone wants to go and look up the periscopes, I'm on Twitter at Jack Posobiec. It's just my name. And from the first moment when we stepped in, the people sort of had that like super extra happy smile. And I don't mean like there was a nice greeter who was there. I mean like, this is your table. This is going to be a great meal. You're going to have a good time. And then we were asking basic questions, and sort of the answers that we were getting back, with my friend George, and the answers that we were getting back were very shady. They were very non-committal. At one point, we were going into the back room, and so they have this ping pong set up with a foosball table, and I was just saying, oh, foosball. It's like when I was, in the military, we used to always play foosball in the Navy, and on the swim base, and I said, can we play foosball? And like, they didn't know what I was talking about. And even the owner, or I guess the manager who was there, didn't really know what I was talking about. And I said, and I like pointed to it a couple times. And they said, oh, that, yeah. Because there's a foosball table there that clearly hadn't been used in a very long time. So I then look back and see this curtained off area with some chairs behind it. I could kind of see like the outline of some plush chairs and like a flickering light as if it was candlelight. And so I said, is that the bathroom? Because I couldn't see any other bathrooms. So I go back there. And meanwhile, I'm looking around, and this is like 9 o'clock at night in a bar in DC, and there's little kids like just randomly sort of walking around, going back and forth.
Jack did not start claiming that he was there to debunk Pizzagate until long after something terrible happened related to the theory. At the end of 2016, a man named Edgar Welch believed in Pizzagate and went to Comet Ping Pong with a rifle and fired a shot inside. Nobody got hurt in that incident, but he was arrested. On an earlier episode of the pod, we briefly touched on a news item. He died recently. He was released from prison, then got in some sort of conflict with police and died. But after this happened, all of these people, whether it was Jack Posobiec, Alex Jones, Mike Cernovich, all these people that promoted Pizzagate ran from it. They deleted content in troves. They tried to retell the history of it. It was a lot of like, well, I always thought it was kind of ridiculous. I didn't claim that exactly. And most of these people are lying straight out of their ass.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's very easy to lie about something that started as a lie in the first place, right? So it's like, what difference does the truth matter once you've already perverted the truth? But so something else happens around this time, and it happened. It sort of preceded his investigation into Pizzagate, which is Jack subtly injects into his Twitter bio the phrase "former CBS News." That's FMR CBS News, which gives the impression that he is a journalist, ex or current, who has some association with CBS News. And so I was very curious about that when I started to look into him. And so I reached out to CBS News, and they were like, we have nothing to do with this guy. I mean, they were like, no, sir, I beg of you, we have nothing to do with this man. We never worked for us. Right? It was everybody who I asked was like, sir, please, we beg of you. This is not, it was really funny. So I asked places he's lived. I asked like the affiliate in Pennsylvania, in Eastern Pennsylvania. I asked the affiliate in the Maryland area and in the DC area and stuff like that, everybody was like, "Sir, I beg of you, we have nothing to do with Jack Posobiec. We have nothing to do with this man, nothing." So I was like, okay, well, everybody says no. What could it possibly be? Well, if you remember back to when he was at Temple, he had that internship in which he was like carrying party favors for a summer for a conservative talk radio show that was not actually CBS News at all. It was it was owned by CBS Broadcasting, but had no affiliations with actually CBS News. And Michael Smerconish, who worked for that radio station, went as far to say as he has no recollection whatsoever. He was another one who was just like trying to signal, please, nothing, nothing to do with this man. Very funny, actually. So Trump wins, and this overlaps the whole Pizzagate thing, of course, because we're skipping around a little bit in time in this blurry area between fall and winter of 2016 into 2017. And Jack is posting a lot under the name, under the former CBS News thing, looking like an official news person of some kind. And he's using Periscope much more now. Now he's really using this kind of live video thing to see, sort of get people going on the right. And one way he does it is after Trump, there's an anti-Trump protest in the DC, Maryland area, and he jumps in the middle of it and starts agitating them to yell things that will sound bad, right? Like sort of like kill Trump. Well, he can make them sound violent. And this is his sort of, I know, Hannah, you've read his second book, which I gave you back in January of last year. And he calls this like 4D warfare, right? This is like,
yeah,
right. How would you describe like what this is? It's some sort of like Russian thing. I think he thinks so.
Yeah, it's like basically kind of like a influence op. It's sort of to try and push people to do things that they wouldn't necessarily, or that you think they would be willing to do with just like a little bit of a push. Yeah. But it's not like directly intervening and saying like, "Hey, you should do this." It's like basically signaling to someone that they should kind of do a certain action.
Right, and it's something that they can, that his own side can use to make, in this case, protesters seem violent or whatever. So this peaks in around January there after or around Trump's inauguration. There's a protest outside of the Trump Hotel in DC. Which became a hot spot for white nationalists and other people to hang out, like, and also pro-Trump, like random Proud Boys. Everybody, I mean, people wanted to go there. It was like the spot, and people were protesting outside of it, anti-Trump protesters. And one of the protesters happened to be holding a sign that said something that seemed like a little bit too much for people. It said, "Rape Melania," and as we found out later, Jack had cooked that up. And was doing it in order to get it to trend on Twitter, which it did, because the safeguards on Twitter were quite bad in general. And he was able to get that story to trend, and we know that from like chats that Joe Bernstein from BuzzFeed was able to acquire, that it also involved Timothy Baked Alaska Gianne, who is a racist. Eventually white nationalist or neo-Nazi. I don't know what you'd call him, but like, I mean,
probably a white nationalist.
Yeah, probably a white nationalist. I mean, he's such a bozo that you almost don't want to give him. But I guess he does believe in a white ethnicity, probably. He also did a wonderful song called "We Love Our Cops."
We love our cops, our law enforcement. We love our military, they're important.
So that basically happened. And Jared, can you speak to some of the people who are in Jack's circle at this time? Who is he kind of posting with? Who are his buddies online?
So Jack makes inroads with people like Mike Cernovich, who we talked about. He also makes friends with Cassandra Fairbanks, who initially got a blast of press for being somebody who was like, "I love Bernie Sanders, but I'm voting for Trump." So one of these people that like media at the time profiled as like a curiosity. Wow, how could somebody make such a dramatic switch? She would go on to work for like Russian state media. I think she was at Sputnik briefly.
Yeah, she was at Sputnik.
Writes for the Gateway Pundit. At a point, she works with Tim Pool. She has totally crazy beliefs. She has a very cozy relationship with Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, or at least did. She has pet monkeys. She married a dude who is, I have not cared enough to really dig into him, but initial cursor reads as white nationalist, probably. That is a statement of opinion, not fact here.
He was an early Gab guy.
Just a very bizarre thing. And then you've got the baked Alaskas and all of this. It is this sort of early staple of all of these influencers that really leaned into the sort of 4chan-y aesthetics that define the online movements surrounding the 2016 Trump campaign, with based Pepes and, reading Covington, apparently. What Jack would do all the time, what all these guys would do all the time, and I never thought it was that interesting enough to write a piece about it then, was they would go on 4chan and they would just basically scoop things off of 4chan. Like somebody would be like, I just saw a bomb go off, and they'd be like, breaking, a bomb has exploded. And they would be like, oh, look at me, I'm a journalist. And they were just ripping off of 4chan. I would see their post and I'd be like, yeah, I saw that thread 10 minutes ago too. They're just refreshing the politics board on 4chan over and over and over again all day, and turning it into content on Twitter. And predictably, a lot of people get the impression that they probably support some really racist, heinous shit.
It's like all the time. I mean, we are talking about the class of people that, when I have repeatedly made jokes that I am Mike's boss, that there are literally right-wing publications that have ran with that statement so hard that I have been described as the head of Hate Watch.
Spiritually, yeah, I'm obviously not with SPLC anymore, but spiritually, you are always my boss. So I want to keep this moving, and let's go. Let's just quickly talk about March 2017. He goes with a crew of people, like Jared described, to a book signing in DC for a book authored by Scott Greer. And if you've ever been irritated at a guy who says he has a 6'1", 180 IQ in his bio, that's Scott Greer. And I will ask Hannah to kind of run down what crowd is there. But before I do, the reason why this is interesting here, Jack is live streaming from this this white nationalist book launch. And he says to the camera, someone heard, they turned Kekistanis into soap. They're turning them into lampshades, which is a weird thing to say. Kekistani was a bad meme that was sort of like a 4chan meme, which sort of was this idea that if you were Kek, if you were on 4chan and you were kind of into that culture, that was your national origin or something. But it also had this cross section with Nazis, right? They were just Nazis, Kekistanis. They were just usually juvenile, childlike Nazi posters, basically. And the soap lampshades thing is the type of language that white nationalists and neo-Nazis would use then to mock the Holocaust. But who is at this Scott Greer event?
Just a little context about Scott Greer too. So Scott Greer he worked for the Daily Caller, but he also wrote for white nationalist websites under a pseudonym. He wrote for Richard Spencer's publication Radix Journal, under the pseudonym Michael McGregor, I think. And he said he stopped in 2015. The Atlantic had previously reported on that. But the people who are at Greer's event, it's a mixture of people in the conservative movement and then out white nationalists. And then there's kind of a middle ground, sort of the one that Scott occupies, which are these people within the movement. It's often called entryism. It's basically people who are kind of white nationalists who find their way into the conservative movement, and they're trying to change it from the inside. So they're basically leading this sort of double life of being within the white nationalist movement, but also having this kind of quote unquote normie day job. There's several people there who basically fit into that category. It's not really worth getting into. It's kind of getting into the weeds to name all of the names, but basically these are people who were writing for sites like American Renaissance, the website that Jared Taylor runs that we mentioned earlier. It's like VDare. And they're doing it under pseudonyms, and people knew that they
so what
were
you're
living this double
saying,
life.
So if I can synthesize what you're saying here, Jack was hanging out with a bunch of white nationalists there, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm sensing a pattern.
People would know that they were white nationalists.
I think the listeners can hear a pattern here, which is that the sort of the broader white supremacist movement, which includes both white nationalists and neo-Nazis, is where Jack kind of came up from, right? I mean, that is where he came up from. And I think that is an important part, because when we talk about Jack now, it is a piece that gets not only mislabeled, but ignored.
It's also, I will note, the only reason people even know who the fuck he is.
Well, that's the purpose of this, yes.
Yeah, if he hadn't...
We're going to get to the point where they do.
Or this is just a great spot to make crystal clear. The purpose of all of this is because if he hadn't done this, he would have not entered politics the way he did and now hang out in the Oval Office and get paid God knows how much money by Turning Point USA and whoever else, right?
He's so leaden, and there's very little about him that is likable. I mean, like, you see somebody like Cernovich has much more range when he goes on his rants or whatever, something like that. Jack would be just another like dead-eyed MAGA poster. I mean, if he was doing then what he does now, basically. But let's go to something very important that is I need to talk about, because I need to get off my chest. So I want to just say something. I hear a lot of people talk about Twitter, the old Twitter, and everybody's like, "Oh, don't you remember the old Twitter and like how good it was?" No. Okay, yes, unusable. I've been locked. I refused. I've been private. I don't want to post on it. It's so horrible now. I know you guys do, and like I'm with you spiritually, and I know that you miss the old Twitter in the way it was culturally for us, because that's a different thing. Like it was culturally for us, but as an institution, it was horrible. And here's a good example of why. So Jack gets verified by Twitter in April of 2017 with the former CBS News thing in his bio being probably the main justification for why, unless some very rich person tapped Jack Dorsey to get him verified. So all this guy has done is break the rules of Twitter that were there, be it Pizzagate, be it pushing, amplifying disinfo constantly. And Twitter turns around and rewards him with a blue verification badge, which makes him look like he might as well work for Washington Post. He is then hired by Rebel News.
Good morning, Rebel Media, or good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. Good YouTube, I guess you could say. I'm Jack Posobiec, and I've got a big announcement for you guys. I'm joining forces with the Rebel Media to become the Rebel Media's DC Bureau Chief.
Rebel News is run by Ezra Levant. It is a Canadian reactionary website. Which is a kind of, what would you say, it's sort of a Canadian Trump nationalist like vibe, except Canadian. I mean,
it's kind of like Breitbart, but Canadian.
I mean, it came up around the same time of like what we were talking about before, when the flavor of reactionary stuff was anti-Muslim. So Rebel News would come up and just run all these stories about like migrant crime or like Muslim crime or whatever. And then when the Trump movement came into swing, they managed to successfully, for a while at least, hitch their cart to it and ride it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So he starts working there, and I just want to point out, like, you got to remember now, hold in your head when he started working there and how long he lasts. So immediately after getting verified, he starts, the first thing he does with his verification badge is start posting like about a fake assassination plot to kill Trump during his London trip then. And that you can only find that through archives. And then he pivots from that to a bunch of posts referencing Dugan. I'm going to, not to stereotype, I'm going to Hannah again. Have you heard of Dugan? Who is he? Is he cool? I know that Glenn Greenwald recently posted. He's like, well, Dugan, we're going to find out. Good, bad, whatever. Could be anything. Which one is it, Hannah?
So Dugan is Alexander Dugan is a Russian philosopher and political theorist, best known for this idea of Eurasianism. He's very popular in certain segments of the U.S. and European far right. I think there's a number of reasons.
I wonder
why.
which segments those are based on how our conversation has been going so far.
Yes. Certain ones like white nationalists and neo-Nazis, but also other people. ... So basically, like, Dugan is one of these Russian far-right theorists who writes in English, and basically if you invite him to a podcast, he will just do it. So you sometimes see people just I don't know, Stu Peters has had him on. Lauren Southern went to go meet him a couple of years ago in Russia to do an interview. He always kind of says the same thing. Arctos Media, which is you guessed it, white nationalist publishing house, has published a lot of Dugan's work in English, in translation. And that's kind of part of why he's become popular in the West. But this kind of dynamic of Dugan working with far-right activists in the US and Europe really goes back decades.
Well, and among other things that are mentioned in his work, he kind of talks about, in one of the books that Jack promotes, he talks about amplifying the kind of natural political and racial differences and whatever in the United States in order to kind of disrupt society here, right? Like he talks about something like that in so many words.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I do want to make one thing clear about Eurasianism too, is it's a philosophy that is fundamentally about Russian power. It's about building a big and powerful Russia. Dugan talks about multipolarity a lot. Basically, the idea of there being different competing powers, but it's still, at the end of the day, he is a Russian nationalist. He wants to build a strong Russian state. This isn't about the U.S.
And I believe there's a quote of his that's like, kill, kill, kill Ukrainians, right?
That got him in a lot of hot water back in the day. But
they're doing
he's
it.
kind of on the sway. Well, yeah. They are in fact doing that. They're also killing a lot of Russians. So,
yes, of course. Yeah. Well, what I would say about this is obviously the kind of thing that you would post if you're Jack, if you are a true blue patriot and lover of the United States of America. Anyway,
100%.
Yes, definitely the kind of thing you want to air out on social media. So he, around the same time that he's posting about Dugan, he goes to cover an event supporting Steve Bannon at the White House. This is mid-April of 2017. Now, Bannon has become a kind of scapegoat in the sense of all of the racist, sort of neo-fascist vibes around Trump are being pinned on Bannon, who was at the time working as an advisor. And this Save Steve Bannon campaign is sort of to preserve that racist, neo-fascist wing of of MAGA. There's a strange person, some weird person who is going through Discords to promote this event. I don't know who it is, and I'm not saying it's Jack or not. But there is a person who's just everywhere, like, you got to come to this, you got to come to this, you got to come to this. And whoever it is who promoted that gets a lot of extreme fringe far-right figures to show up. And Jack is kind of the guy with a mic going around to interview them for Rebel to kind of get attention for this. It's very weird, actually, because it's a sort of a pop-up rally and there's no actual sort of groundswell around Bannon except for these people who are neo-Nazis. One of them, before I get into who they are, a lot of them came from this Discord called Anticom. Anticom stands for anti-communist, and it was sort of a flip of, they use like yellow and black, like this as a kind of a flip of Antifa, kind of like they present themselves like in their symbols and stuff like that as being like bizarro Antifa. But in reality, most of them are neo-Nazis who belong to other neo-Nazi discords. And a bunch of people are there. Richard Spencer shows up at this again. Okay. So does a guy named Greg Conti. I believe Cassandra Fairbanks was there as well. So was a guy named Will Chamberlain, who, when I asked him about this years later, his voice rose like an entire octave. And I was like, were you at that thing? He's like, yo, yes, I was there. For people who don't know Will Chamberlain, he is one of the most insufferable Trump posters there are, because he's just like a very wormy kind of figure who doesn't have like, who just kind of hides behind his keyboard and does stuff. But Hannah, he stages an interview with the Clark brothers. Who are they? And also, who is Greg Conti?
So Greg Conti used to work with Richard Spencer back in the day. He used a pseudonym, Greg Ritter, basically until he was outed, and I think local media basically discovered who he was. I mean, Conti now, I think, if you had to put a pin on his ideology, I think the safest way to describe Greg Conti is that he has recently been posting a lot of clips of himself in front of a Nazi flag to Telegram that are explicitly pro-Nazi. So that's Greg Conti.
And I should add that he is dressed in a way that is remarkably similar to Steve from Blue's Clues.
You know, I had never actually thought of that.
And let's look at I want to just point out that people who were there, like the people who were at this event, because again, this reflects on Jack and where he's hanging out. Greg Conti yelled to a group of fellow travelers, like, either you're for or against the Fuhrer, right? Like in reference to Hitler. So I just want to make sure we got that.
Yes, it's quite explicit, I would say. The Clark brothers, meanwhile, are these two young, I think they were in their like early 20s, late teens, somewhere.
Yeah, Jeffrey Clark was 30, and Edward Clark was his younger brother. He was like 23.
Based on court documents, when they went through Jeffrey Clark's possessions, I mean, it was a lot of neo-Nazi paraphernalia.
So this is a pair of brothers who I actually would interact with on Gab, in the sense that they would threaten me when I was a reporter, and I would do stories about the far right. I used to post on Gab, and these guys would threaten me. And the older one, Jeffrey Clark, was arrested on a weapons charge, and the idea was that they were potentially planning a massacre. And Jeffrey Clark had in his room, it was like covered with, it was all black. The windows were blacked out. He had a noose hanging from the ceiling and guns. So it looked like some really dark stuff going on with this guy. And then Edward Clark, his brother, shot himself and commit suicide on the day of the Tree of Life massacre, which was going to happen beyond the timeline that we're doing in this podcast. He shot himself in part because he had been involved in like all the chats with Bowers, the man who commit that horrible atrocity and murdered 11 Jewish people that day.
I think one of them tried to join Identity Europa at some point, but was rejected.
The point is that Jack, kind of shacks up with these guys while doing his coverage of the Bannon event, and kind of coaxes an interview out of them. It looks like they have a very friendly relationship while they're doing it. I want to pause that there, because we're going to come back to the Clark brothers in a second, and sort of show that maybe he did have a pretty cozy relationship with those two guys. So in the same month that this is happening, Jack posted a photograph of the neo-fascist political movement, ONR. There's a sort of an attractive blonde woman in ONR garb. I think they wear black and green fascist uniforms. And he posts a thing just sort of like, oh, the nationalists stand up to migrants in Poland, but doesn't tell anybody what he is sharing to his fans. And the MAGA people who respond, like, who know better, are like, oh, that's great, and like, glad Poland is taking control of their country in the replies. Yeah, ONR happens to be a Hitler-aligned fascist movement from the 1930s in Poland that used to bomb Jewish homes. So I just wanted to just insert that one in there. Okay, now let's go to May 2017. Jack continues to push the Russian disinfo line on Seth Rich. I feel like, Jared, you can tell us who Seth Rich was and what this was about.
Yeah, I know a lot about Seth Rich because I lived about a block and a half away from him at the time he died. I didn't know him, to be clear, but it rocked not only news media, but also the neighborhood I was living in at the time, which is also where the Clark brothers lived, at least the younger one. So Seth Rich was a DNC staffer who was, by some Trump supporters, theorized to be the source of the Podesta emails. This would have been a disgruntled DNC employee, ripped these emails, gave them to WikiLeaks, and on a late night after a lot of drinks at the Wonderland Ballroom, which is a great bar in DC. Great bar.
Awesome bar.
He's stumbling home. He decides to walk home, and that's not a short walk, and it's a very weird walk. But on his walk home, he's killed. So the conspiracy line among Trump supporters becomes that Seth Rich leaked these emails. Surely, we'll assume he leaked these emails. He is the source. So the Clintons killed him and made it look like an accident. To this day, nobody knows who killed Seth Rich. We don't know. We just don't know. There was a lot of investigation. There was a lot of money put into it. All kinds of just like ambulance chasing, shitty attorney type people swooped in.
And lawsuits against the people who pushed lies also. Even
right.
A lot, Fox News and stuff. Lawsuits were settled, etc.
Right. It was just torture for this family. And Jack Posobiec was a major pusher of this Seth Rich garbage.
Yeah. And, we happen to know somebody who in that area who was snapping photographs of some suspicious looking gentlemen who were filming in that area. And those men turned out to be Jack Posobiec, Edward Clark, and Jeffrey Clark. So not only did he interview these guys, the interview didn't look casual to me when I saw it. Didn't look off the cuff, it looked staged. But I don't know. I mean, maybe he met them there for the first time. But now you see him, and it's actually the Clark brothers are trailing Jack and filming for him. This is why when I was with SBLC, I used to use the headline "Neo-Nazi collaborator" because he was literally collaborating with neo-Nazis. And that's a reason why nobody was, asked me to remove that. No lawyer threatened or anything like that, because you cannot deny that Jack Posobiec collaborated with neo-Nazis. We continue. Oh boy, this one is huge. Okay. So he uses the verification badge and his status with Rebel News to push something that I think is got to be the most sus. I think we're going to use that word that the kids use. Sus thing that Jack Posobiec maybe has ever done. He starts to push the hashtag around Macron leaks. Now, for people who are unfamiliar, during that election, Macron is running against Marine Le Pen, the far-right favorite candidate. And we know that Jack liked Marine Le Pen because he was posting photographs of her meeting with people in D.C. As early as, I think, January of 2017. She's also, at that point, the favored candidate of Russia because she's got that nationalist kind of don't touch Russia attitude. It's important for me to establish that in France, they have laws around promoting politics in the immediate run up to an election. So let's say the election is on Monday or something like that. I don't know. I'm just like Saturday and Sunday are silent times. You're not supposed to post anything about that. There are literal laws about it. So there is a hack and leak campaign, which was very big, like a Russian tactic around that time, of Macron's emails. Some of the emails that ultimately get leaked are real, and some of them are fake, okay, in order to try to create an atmosphere of wrongdoing. Le Pen is down in the polls to Macron. It doesn't look good. This is a last-ditch effort to get Le Pen in the lead. This starts, Le Pen says something like on a debate or whatever to Macron, I've heard about your emails or something. So somebody tipped her off. Then the French media can't really do anything. No one can really do anything, but a bunch of American reactionary figures, that's a polite way of saying it, start to distribute these emails. A fellow named Andrew Weave Ornheimer, who was at the time living somewhere in Eastern Europe. Nothing sus about that, right, guys? Anyway, he's there, and somewhere the emails are as far as we know. Now, you worked at DFR Lab for a bit, Jared, and you might remember some of this stuff. But DFR Lab kind of figures out that there is no place between, there's no real stop between Russia getting the emails and Weave. They just wind up in Weave's vicinity. He starts to sort of put these, according to DFR Lab, onto 4chan. That's where the account comes from. Then when they get to 4chan, the emails are received immediately by Jack Posobiec, who says he just happened to be on 4chan at that time. Once Jack gets these emails, he is putting them onto Twitter and telling people to send tips from them to Chuck Johnson. We're going to have Hannah break down who some of these people are and Jared break down who they are. But I think it's important to also note that when Jack posts these things, bots from Russia, from the Kremlin, are amplifying these tweets to like astronomical traction. Like he's doing just bonkers numbers. Like the tweet drops and it's like he's racked up like 500 retweets within 30 seconds. So pausing it right there, anybody want to say who Weave is in this, who Chuck Johnson is, and bottom text? What else?
So Andrew Orenheimer uses the nickname Weave, and he's a hacker who after his arrest got involved in neo-Nazism. He's been the webmaster of the Daily Stormer neo-Nazi site run by Andrew Anglin, who also has some kind of weird ties to Russia. Weave also very notably has a very large swastika on his chest. I remember the internet discovered his OkCupid profile, where actually he had that photo, and it was a little disturbing.
And also his mother told me that he's Jewish on both sides of his family, or he has Jewish on both sides of his family, which essentially bottomed out his career as a Nazi. Tough thing with a swastika.
But he has not stopped. I think that's important to bring up. He has not changed his beliefs, as far as I know, and is still involved in the movement to some extent. Chuck Johnson, aka Charles Johnson, is a bit more of an enigma. So at the time this was happening, Chuck, he had been banned from Twitter, but he was running this website called Got News, and he was this kind of like hanger on to the alt-right, sort of. I remember seeing him at a Richard Spencer event in March 2016. I had a very vivid image of Chuck Johnson at the end of the event walking up and eating sliders that had been put out there hours before. And I was like, man, dude, those are cold. Also, wait, is that Chuck Johnson? What the fuck? This is right when I first started covering this stuff, so I
man's got to eat. Man's got to eat. I'm sorry.
Man's definitely got to eat. So that's fair.
And he has like a very red, bushy beard, and he was the first high-profile Twitter suspension because he was, he was chasing someone down and using the N-word, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
Yes.
He is like an early prototype. Like when you think of like alt-right troll, it's like Chuck Johnson is like the prototype of it. I think is maybe the simplest way to put it. It has 4chan as a brain, has connections to like Peter Thiel world and stuff. I think has pretty much fallen out of favor with them, has thoroughly, I will say, lost his mind to the extent that it was fully tethered to begin with. He
now says that his involvement with the movement at this time was for the feds. That's
what he says. The feds really wanted him to do Macron links. Anyway, so the point is that this crew working with Jack and Macron links. Now Jack may say I was not working with them, but it is a very interesting group, right? Like Weave knows Chuck Johnson and Jack knows Chuck Johnson. So it's not like these guys, and we don't know that Jack knew Weave, but we do know that they both knew Chuck Johnson. We can prove that. So it's not like a group that was of three strangers. The next thing I want to point out about this is that Jack will say his claim on this is that he just happens to be on 4chan, as I mentioned, and was just refreshing 4chan to do it. The timing of that is a little sus. The other person who was involved in doing this was, I believe, Nathan D'Amigo was briefly involved in sharing it from Identity Europa. These are all people who are kind of in the white nationalist orbit. Jack's tweets were the ones that went crazy. He's the one who kind of formed the hashtag Macron leaks, as far as I can remember. And again, got special attention from the Kremlin for his posts. Whether that was pre-planned or he just was a useful idiot, you can just speculate because you cannot prove it. The next thing we should talk about, and I'm going to just hit this really briefly. Jack got caught plagiarizing something written by Jason Kessler. Jason
Kessler organized the 2017 Unite the Right rallies.
He hadn't done it yet there. He hadn't done it yet. This is still May.
Right.
In a few months he will. But it is an interesting guy to kind of highlight because, again, like lots of neo-Confederate stuff and tons of white supremacist stuff and kind of like that dirty racism, like that dirty white supremacist racism. Like when you read it, it's like really grimy and it makes you feel nauseous. So Jack was plagiarizing Jason Kessler, which is like, whoop, I just happened to find some Jason Kessler literature.
I want to note here that we've been talking about a lot. This has all happened in about the course of a month.
Yeah.
So he has... Rebel Media
He's
has
very busy.
Slammed. He has gone from the DC bureau chief of Rebel Media, whatever the hell that means, and they have slammed the eject button as hard as they can for plagiarism.
Yeah, he was gone
about a month after.
I don't think that the plagiarism is why they got rid of him. That's what I think was around the time that they did it. I suspect that there was a tremendous amount of heat around Macron leaks because when I reached out to Ezra Levant about this, who is, again, the guy who runs Rebel Media, he responded to me like, do not, under any circumstances, insinuate that I was involved in a crime. Which is like, that just lets you know how shady Macron Leaks was.
Even the Canadian racists that make up 50% of the white nationalist movement in the United States, for some reason, have stayed.
You mean like captive dipshit or whatever his name is? They just got ID'd. Okay, we don't have to get. Well, let's get sidetracked. Yeah. Okay, so again, he starts spreading more disinfo about Antifa around this time. I don't want to get into too much of it, but there's this growing movement. This is pre-Andy No. Right, Andy No is still in the womb here, and there's this, this is his forebears are out there being like Antifa did this, Antifa did that, Antifa did that, to create this impression that there is some sort of left-wing version of this white supremacist terror that's percolating everywhere. Jack joins Laura Loomer, the woman who was in President Trump's plane and who ate dog food. If anybody is familiar with that video,
and I'll show you right here. Look, this is the bison product right here. It clearly says dog food topper. You can see on camera. Actually tastes good. I'm not gonna lie.
That video is beautiful.
Food eating woman who's run who's had a significant amount of plastic surgery done.
Changed herself to Twitter headquarters.
Ran for office in Florida, failed, moved to a district where somebody was retiring, and she thought she would have a better chance. That Republican was like, fuck. Okay, no, I'm not retiring this time. I'll run again. Lost again.
Yeah. And so that person and Jack. Now there is a as a former theater person myself, I want to point out that this Shakespeare in the Park event with Julius Caesar is like a big theater thing in New York. This is like a big deal for people. This is a good time to see, these shows are sold out. They do a production of Julius Caesar. It has some heavy Trumpian overtones, which is not my favorite way to take a play and just like be like, oh, everybody cares about Trump now, let's make it about Trump. But anyway, I didn't see it. Maybe it's great. I don't know who even bothered to get pissed about this in retrospect, like on the right, but I guess they were pissed about everything back then. So Jack and Laura get up there and shout at the live participants and kind of interrupt the play and yell, like, what do they yell? Like, you are all Goebbels, or like, what are you're all gerbil?
Yeah.
So Laura storms the stage, is ranting, "This is terrible. This is inciting violence, whatever." And then security starts to escort her off. She's just like instantly swarmed. The crowd is booing. People are just like, "Get off the stage. Go away. You saw," just heckling her. And then as it looks like Laura's bit is done, Jack, who is in the audience filming Laura's stunt, stands up and goes, "You're all Goebbels. You're all Goebbels. You're all Goebbels. Nazis, Nazis, Nazis." Fuck it. I'm going to play a clip.
You are all Goebbels. You are all Nazis like Joseph Goebbels. This is Goebbels. You are all Goebbels. You are inciting terrorists. The blood of Steve Scalise is on your hands. The blood of Steve Scalise is on your hands. Goebbels would be proud. Goebbels would be proud. Goebbels would be proud.
Come this way. Sir,
Goebbels would be proud. Sir, let me have my bag. Goebbels would be proud. Goebbels would be proud.
So yeah, that was that. So let's do June 2017. Okay, we are approaching what is going to be the culmination of this podcast. But let's do June 2017 because this stuff is important too. At one point, Jack tweets out about a stunt performed by Identity Europa. There was a black civil rights advocate named Lutz Segu. I don't know much about their career, but you can imagine that this would be a pro-black thing about black identity. And Identity Europa, they have a different identity. It's a Europa identity. Shows up. This is a white nationalist group, like sort of like a forerunner to Nick Fuentes fans. Shows up and disrupts in the same way that Julius Caesar was. They disrupted Julius Caesar. They disrupt this poor person's talk. And Jack tweets about the Identity Europa thing. Why shouldn't white people allowed to speak at a racial seminar? Which is wow. Well, I'd like to see how they would have taken it if a black person came up in the middle of a Identity Europa meeting and started yelling. Anyway, at the same time this is happening, there is a kind of split in the pro-Trump movement of these young activists between what was always called the alt-right to what became known as the alt-light. Both of these terms become completely meaningless after a while, as Hannah will probably explain, but just what happened here?
There ended up being these two dueling rallies in June, partly because there's supposed to be this free speech rally in Washington, D.C., and it included a bunch of basically various names that we have encountered while recording this podcast, including one of them who was said to be invited was Richard Spencer. Basically, Jack Posobiec and that crew breaks off and says, no, we don't want to associate with him, and we're going to do our own rally. So they basically take this free speech rally, kick Spencer out of it, and do their own thing. At the same time, Richard has his own rally, and I think they were maybe about a mile apart. This is right after the theater stunt, and I think, Posobiec and others will since then tended to frame this as ideological difference. This was really, at the time, the fighting between Richard and Jack and that group was basically over that Julius Caesar stunt. It wasn't about ideology.
It was a popularity contest. This movement, Trump was in office. At this point, the administration's rocking and rolling, trying, at least at that point, to follow through on some of the far right stuff. You've got Steve Bannon in the mix. You've got people starting to pay attention to immigration policy, that sort of thing. And I think all of these people, looking back on it now, it's easy to say, rightfully sensed, this could be our moment. This could be a chance for us to take our internet posting and become something. You know, the Julius Caesar stunt gets covered in places like New York Magazine or some. They're liking the attention. They're liking being treated as if they are a legitimate political entity. So they could say it's a battle about ideology. It's a dispute about this kind of tactic with the disruption of the Shakespeare play. But what this is also a lot about is basically competing for what is like a less extreme version of what Nazis will call optic cucking, which is basically trying to hide your ideology under softer phrasing, softer terms to, quote unquote, hide your power level. You believe all this crazy shit, but you can, put on a suit and tie and sound normal. This was like another layer of that, where it's like, oh, well, we're not going to be like, diehard white ethno-state, white savior Trump kind of thing. We're going to get a little bit softer, and that's the way to do it. So it's, there's a lot of differences here, but I think the point you're making is correct, Hannah. It is not ideological, and we should not, at the time, this is not an ideological split in a meaningful way, and we shouldn't give them credit for
it's
that.
also competing narcissists, right? It's like malignant. They're all malignant narcissists, ultimately. And I think one thing I want to inject here before moving on to the next point, and I think it's useful for listeners to be reminded of this. The entire conservative media infrastructure that had existed during the Obama years kind of imploded when Trump rose up, in the sense that like all the National Review and all these like hokey things, Weekly Standard and all these things, those things were done. People wanted something harder. And with that field open, all these narcissists, social media narcissists, came in to fill the void. They wanted to be, they wanted to maximize attention, and they were getting attention, right? When they sort of split like this, everybody wants to be the leader. Everybody wants to get the most amount of attention. And that was going on there too. And if you look now, and I think it's useful to do this, Jack is still in the mix with this, of course, and is like one of the, maybe the biggest influencer, in the MAGA sphere, really. Now it's all influencers. All influencers have replaced any pretend front of conservative journalism. So in July 2017, we're getting closer to the apex, to the climax of this podcast, the structure, as we move forward with it. It's almost like it's like a great novel that ends in like a huge,
This is War and Peace.
Posobiec. Okay, let's do this. Let me try this way. Posobiec is on the ground in advance of a speech Trump gives in Warsaw for reasons I cannot figure out. And I looked pretty deeply into this. Trump goes over there to give a speech in Warsaw that ultimately is like Norwegian black metal of political speeches. It is fire and brimstone, dark, nativist, Hellraiser 2. It is essentially, Stephen Miller's Dark Heart, like reaching out at the world and saying there is no joy and there never will be. So that's his speech that he goes out to give. For some reason, Jack is in the middle of this early on. Now, whether they had any kind of connection with the Trump people and the Trump campaign at this point, I have no idea. But there is some sort of MAGA meetup. Again, I don't know, is it official or is it unofficial? Is it organized by the polls? I don't know. With, okay, I'm not going to pronounce, I'm going to butcher this, is Ruch Narodowy? I don't know, RN is what they're called. And they are an extreme far right political party that gets about 7% of the vote in Poland. Jack is there running around, talking it up with the people in this party while Trump is giving his speech, which is, a little unusual in my opinion. I'm not saying that the Trump campaign, White House got him out there on taxpayers. I don't know how he got out there or whether he was told to get. I have no idea how it was coordinated, but he was out there working it out with some extreme fringe figures in Poland during this time. One of them is somebody he develops a kind of a friendship with, at least based upon his tweets. There's a guy named Krzysztof Bosak, which sounds a lot like Christoph Balzac, which is how I always remembered his name.
More like Christoph Bozo.
This is anti-Polish racism.
Busted. So Bozak dabbles in Holocaust revisionism. He also espoused a deep cut conspiracy that suggests the Earth perhaps does not revolve around the sun. I don't really know what to say about that other than Jack and him are friends, and they seem to be, and they posted a lot in 2018 and 2019 after this about Antifa, and with Bozak always saying like, oh, we got to do something about Antifa, because I'm sure Polish Antifa probably ring this guy's bell every time he tries to do anything because he's a loser.
Also, anti-fascists in Europe, like Antifa in the U.S. will break the window of a Starbucks. But like anti-fascists in a place like Greece will just like kill you.
Well, no. What they will do is they will take the sun, and then they will make the Earth revolve around it, and you can't have that. You can't fucking have that.
Antifa did it again.
It's not meant to be. That's not how hierarchy works.
That's the classified mission of Trump's Space Force, is to reclaim the revolution of the solar system from Antifa. But Mike, he does something else when he's in Poland.
He does. Oh, he does. And this is I don't know.
So Jack goes to Auschwitz, which you may have heard of in a history class as maybe the most famous Nazi concentration camp. Where
I think probably safer to just call it a death camp.
It's a death camp, an extermination camp, an untold amount of suffering and death in this place. So what's Jack do? He goes there, he posts a selfie from Auschwitz, which is already distasteful.
Strike one.
But then he writes this. And then he tags the Anti-Defamation League, Jewish activist group, organization, one of the biggest in the US. The ADL would be wise to remember what happened the last time people made lists of undesirables. And I think this is a call out to the ADL, which kind of popularized the word alt-light. They put out a report around this time that had like him, Michael Cernovich, other people, and we're like, this is the alt-light. They're not quite Nazis, but like pretty much. So he goes to a death camp and is like, hey, ADL, remember this one? Which I think it speaks for itself. I don't even have
one thing I
to
love to do.
Yeah, I don't really have anything.
One thing I really love to do is go to Auschwitz and flex nuts on Jews. That is like that's a really great thing to do.
Clip this, Hannah. Clip this.
Yeah, I mean, no, seriously.
I'm adding that to your performance review.
No, I mean, like, Jack has done worse things on this list than this, I think, because this is just a post. And like, I mean, he's like, look at Macron leaks. It's like, whoa. But like the judgment, right? Like the level of, just his ability to process the world and just think about doing that. Like, imagine going like to the site of like, where there were lynchings or something and like flexing on NAACP or something. It's so insane. It is such an insane thing to do. How do you even, okay, let's say you think it'd be funny. Like, how do you do it and get to the part where it says send and you're just like, how do you, like, aren't you like, okay, that's a little shitty. That can't fucking do that, But he does it.
I mean, that's poster brain. That's what all these guys have. It's like, basically, that's what the entire Trump administration now has. It's basically these people who just don't think about anything else except for in the context of internet engagement.
You can read this post. The charitable read of this post is, of course, is wise to remember what happened last time, made lists of desirables, but like, hey, you guys take the Holocaust seriously. You're trying to Holocaust Kekistani Pepes like us. That's the charitable read. And it's still like egregious and horrific. The darker read of this is just sort of like, we're going to, keep it up and, we're going to rev up the death camps again. And I don't even want to get into that any further, but we're at the climax now. And obviously Jack's life goes on from here. But I will talk about the context around why we ended it here after we're done. But it's August 2017. Now we know who Jack is. And now we know about this little split between the alt-light and the alt-right, as people are calling it. Even if it's not a real split, there is something there. And most of the alt-light folks, in quotes, which include even Gavin McInnes of the Proud Boys, do not attend the Unite the Right event in Charlottesville that goes horribly, horribly wrong for everyone involved. There's the murder of Heather Hare, where James Fields rams his car into a row of other cars, killing her, becomes a sort of a left-wing call to arms against fascism. A lot of people who had been sitting out and trying to focus on economic issues and stuff like that. I still remember the day that it happened, like, the emotions I felt. this happens. Jack happens to be in, I believe, Atlanta for a MAGA meetup of some kind where he's talking to a bunch of what looks like boomers. He mentions something about what happens in Charlottesville, but I think it's mostly like probably to focus on Antifa. I can't recall. Certainly in the days afterwards, he starts focusing on Antifa with the posts. And then August 14th, and this is why it's like this is really, really important. Trump is on his heels. He is really hurting. People are fucking mad.
This is 2 days after that Unite the Right rally.
It's hard to imagine even now any kind of thing Trump doing getting this kind of backlash. It was people had like internalized the racism of Trump's campaign and how he conducted himself and his fans, and they were angry about it. And Trump did not have even close to 50% of the people on his side. And then all of a sudden there's this huge white supremacist event. And people are like, wait a second, this is not our country. They freak out. Everybody's angry. The backlash is in every paper. It's on TV screens all over the country. And then Jack tweets, he's trying to run spin for Trump. And he's trying to get something that's got some legs. He goes after Antifa. He goes after like left-wing violence. He does a bunch of stuff. And then he tweets a thing about Chicago violence, black on black violence in Chicago, which is a huge thing, as everybody on this particular podcast knows, for the right, pointing that out. They love to point out the violence that takes place in Chicago. And he tweets out a link about it. And he says, why no media outrage? And then Trump, for the first time in all of this, now Jack has gone from being the David Bowie guy to being 1488 guy, and he's been to the Macron Leaks guy and all that, and he's been moving in this bizarre direction. We've never seen any kind of media personality move, really. And then Trump retweets him, and there is a second wave of backlash from this. People are like, oh my God, you tweeted the Nazi. You tweeted that Jack Posobiec Nazi, because people didn't know him outside of things like the 1488 thing or whatever. And the people who did knew him well as a kind of a fascist, racist poster. And the backlash for that was so significant that Washington Post actually ran an article about, like, in aftermath of Charlottesville, they were still in their democracy dies in darkness phase, and they're like, did a thing about Jack Posobiec, who Jack Posobiec was. And then in the immediate aftermath of that, the Navy pulled Jack's security clearance away from him. And that is where I would say the career of Jack Posobiec is finally born, at least the version that we know today. And there's so much more we could do. There's so many years in the future, and there's so many insane things that happen after this. But after Trump retweets him, and after the Navy pulls his security clearance, there's a split in two directions. The left liberals know him as this horrific monster of MAGA, this little tyrant, and the MAGA right knows him as Trump's boy. And that is where we stand today.
Mike, thank you for walking us through the early life and career of Jack Posobiec. We were putting together this episode and quickly realized it was going to be completely untenable to capture everything. You could legitimately write a book about this guy, but we're going to have to stop it there for this episode. I think this is important because this retweet from Trump and the outrage it garners is the time where Jack, as himself, breaks through the glass ceiling in the Javits Center. That's bad Clinton campaign joke. But this is when the normies learn who Jack Posobiec is, and this is kind of the beginning of the next stage of his political career, which today is baffling. Considering where he came from. Turning Point USA, arguably the single largest and richest youth activist outreach organization. They have chapters on college campuses. They have an extremely powerful online media wing. They invite a bunch of college kids and high schoolers and stuff to their events. And then they say, you know who these people need to hear from? Jack Posobiec. I don't know how much they pay him, but he's got a very big, visible role at the organization. In the 2020 Trump campaign, during debates, he was in one of the rapid response war rooms. He was at the White House during this most recent Epstein files implosion, photos in the Oval Office. This guy has made a lot of inroads, and I'm sure a lot of money in the process, to where today I feel comfortable describing him as one of the most visible right-wing media personalities on the circuit. But nobody would know who this guy is at all if it wasn't for all of this history that we've talked about today.
Hannah, what are your thoughts? What are your closing thoughts? And then afterwards, tell us where you can find your social media and stuff like that, other than me retweeting you and on Blue Sky. I guess it's not retweeting.
Reskeeting. Thank you. I don't know. I think one thing that's kind of interesting about this time period, particularly looking back at it now and how much things have changed, is that really how indebted a lot of these mainstream MAGA types are to that alt-right period of alt-right activism. And like Jack can say, like, he wasn't involved, that these white nationalist activists were trying to infiltrate the MAGA movement, and he was the one who was preventing it. But it's really hard to look at this and see that. I think the facts sort of speak for themselves. A lot of this work is dealing with people who don't really want to say what their ideology is, or don't really want to be clear about their ideology, and are trying to mask it. So you have to see what they do. And what he has done here is have a continuous history of working with white nationalists, supporting white nationalists, and boosting white nationalist talking points.
And plagiarizing white nationalists.
And plagiarizing white nationalists.
And that's to say nothing about weird, sketchy, hostile government kind of relationships that may or may not exist. I don't know if there's a fire, but the room is filled with smoke.
Yes. I mean, I think in my own work, I've tried to think of Posobiec as someone who has basically co-opted the movement and taken the parts of it that he sees as useful, or other people within the mainstream right see as useful, the Great Replacement being one example, and inserting that into their own world. Like you said, we could probably talk about this for hours, if not days, so I will leave it there and just say you can find me on Blue Sky at Hannah Gais. You can also find me on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. I think that name is fucking stupid. At Hannah Gais. I write for the Baffler and a bunch of other outlets too, and you can find those on my various social media / websites.
We'll link to those in the description of this episode. Hannah, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Between you and Mike, I can't think of any better trio to walk through the early life of Jack.
I should know that we've probably been in some form of group chat, three of us, for like the last decade. But anyway.
That is probably true.
Still don't know what I was waiting for. And my time was running wild, a million dead-end streets, and the days rolled through my eyes. It seemed the days seemed quite the same, just the same, all the same, quite the same. Yeah, these children let you spit on as they try to change their worlds. Well, they're immune to your consultations. Stay quite away with their